Hola, cage fighting connoisseurs. This is Kid Nate of BloodyElbow.com, and I'm here with the Bathrobe review of the Ultimate Fighter 16 finale and the Ultimate Fighter Smashes finales. Those fighting events aired back-to-back Friday and Saturday nights on FX TV here in the United States, and I'm just going to run through the fight cards with quick reviews of each fight and what I think might be good fights for the guys. Coming up next, we're going to start with UFC on FX6, Soteropoulos versus Pearson, a.k.a. the TUF Smashes finale. This was the finale of the Australian debut season of the Ultimate Fighter reality show. This is the second international installment of the TUF series. They've also aired it in Brazil, where it was a massive hit. I have no idea how big a hit it or not it was in Australia. It could have been a complete flop. I have no idea. I don't think it was on as big a TV station in Australia as it was in Brazil. I think it was in a station that was not even quite comparable to Spike TV in the States. But anyway, the card itself was pretty entertaining. Of the cards, I'm not going to go through every fight on the undercard, but I would say that I was very impressed with Joey Beltran's performance against Igor Pekrajek. Really breakthrough performance for Beltran. He's somebody who I had mocked, calling him the new Cabbage after the infamous Cabbage Correa, who was a heavyweight slugger in the old days of the UFC. Joey Beltran was somebody that I really had written off as a fighter. I thought he wasn't developing. I thought he was just relying on his strong chin and willingness to engage in brawls. But against Pekrajek, he really showed a varied attack, mixed it up, and took it to a new level, got a unanimous decision win, and seems revitalized at light heavyweight. Very exciting performance for Beltran. The other notable fight, two other notable fights on the TUF Smashes undercard. Mike Pierce beat Seth Baczynski. Baczynski took a round on two of the judges' cards, though, so it was a close fight. I think Baczynski's height and range and his Thai plum game gave Pierce fits. And once again, kind of a one step forward, two steps back fight for both of these guys. Neither one of them really did what they needed to do to emerge as a contender or a star in the welterweight division. Pierce has already lost three big fights in that division. This was Baczynski's first high-profile fight, and he took a loss. So both of these guys are kind of doomed to the middle of the pack in the very crowded and very tough welterweight division, and nobody wants to fight Mike Pierce with his ground control and mean game. The other notable fight was Chad Mendes just demolished late replacement Yatsen Meza in a minute 55 seconds. Just what you expect from Chad Mendes, who's a top contender in the featherweight division, former title challenger, somebody who's going to be looking to reestablish himself at the top of the division. On the main card, we had, of course, Norman Park and Robert Whitaker winning their lightweight and welterweight Ultimate Fighter prizes, respectively, against Colin Fletcher and Brad Scott. Good performances by those guys, but nothing really special. I don't expect big things from them in the UFC, although I will expect to see them on future UK and Australian cards. And if they can stick around and win some fights, they could become star attractions in those regions, which is very important for the promotion. But the fight I want to talk about, Hector Lombard versus Rousimar Palhares. Lombard just crushed him. This was the debut that Lombard needed to have at UFC on Fox a few months ago, when he fought a pretty tedious and bad fight against Tim Boetsch and dropped a decision. In a fight I thought he won, but his performance was so crappy, I don't think anybody was too upset that he didn't get the decision. But against Palhares, he really showed what he can do. He just beat up Palhares. He stuffed his takedowns and then beat him up on the feet. Palhares is a mean, scary, strong, dangerous guy. I'd never expected to feel sorry for the guy, but at the end of the fight, I was going, poor Toquinho, because Lombard just put a beating on him. I think Lombard has announced his presence in the middleweight division, his arrival in the UFC's middleweight division, and this is somebody that I'm looking forward to seeing a title run from. Really excited about Hector Lombard here. Hopefully the drug tests come back clean. And I say that for every fighter, not just Lombard and Toquinho. And then in the headliner, the coaches, Ross Pearson coached the British team, and George Soteropoulos coached the Aussies. Pearson just took it to Soteropoulos, boxed him up and beat him up bad, finished him early in the third round by TKO. Good return to the lightweight division for Pearson. I think it makes sense to see him here. Soteropoulos is going to have to go back to the drawing board. This is a guy who's on 3 straight losses now after putting together a 7-fight win streak and being talked about in the title picture. He is far from title contention at this point and might want to consider retirement. I honestly don't know where he goes from here. Maybe he can put together a few more wins, but I really struggle to see him putting together another title run. And that brings us to the Ultimate Fighter Team Carwin versus Team Nelson finale. Of course, Carwin was injured and didn't get to fight Roy Nelson. We'll get to who Roy Nelson did fight at the end of this segment, but let's talk about the card. First up, the Facebook card. Pretty good fights. Tim Elliott was impressive. Demolished Jared Papazian. I mean, got two 10-8 rounds from two of the judges and 10-8 rounds from all three of the judges. I mean, you don't see 30-25, 30-25, 30-26. This scores very often. Very impressive performance from flyweight Tim Elliott. I expect him to emerge as a contender in a very thin flyweight division in short order. Mike Rio versus John Kofer. Good back and forth fight. Rio got the submission. Not much else to say about that. Bantamweights, Hugo Viana destroyed Ruben Duran. Looked really impressive in a one-round victory. Not that technically polished, but definitely has some power. On the preliminary Full TV card, TJ Waldberger continues to impress. Nick Catone looked big and strong at welterweight coming down from middleweight, but he made a crucial mistake in the second round and got caught in a triangle choke in a fight that I thought was very winnable for him, that he was on his way to winning. But Waldberger is a tough and wily kid. And that brings us to a UFC debutant, Rustam Kavalov, or Hobby Lobby, as it seemed like Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg were saying. He destroyed Vince Pichel with multiple suplexes and finished him with punches on the ground. But honestly, the guy seemed to be out from the second suplex. Very impressive performance from the Greg Jackson-trained Sambo fighter. It's nice to see some Russian blood getting a win in the UFC again. It's been a long time since we've had an exciting new Russian fighter in the UFC. And then the bantamweights, Johnny Bedford just looked devastating against Marcus Vinicius, the Brazilian TUF veteran. Bedford just looked brutal, and he was a very impressive performance there. Mike Pyle against James Head. James Head came out early and was hurting Mike Pyle, but Mike Pyle answered with a knee to the face from the Thai Plum and got the TKO. A good performance. This is Pyle's probably his last run. He's 37 years old. I'd like to see him get a big fight in the welterweight division. I'd like to see him fight Mike Pierce, but that's not really a big fight for him, and it's a tough one. But I think Pyle deserves a high-profile opponent next, somebody in the top 10. And then featherweights, Dustin Poirier and Jonathan Brookins. Brookins came out early and hurt Poirier. Looked good, but he's got a chronic problem with not tucking his chin, not moving his head. And once he failed to finish Poirier when he had him hurt, Poirier came back, boxed him up, hurt him bad, and then put him in a Darce choke to win at the end of the first round. It was a really good performance of Poirier, somebody that I'm expecting big things. He lost to the Korean Zombie, but I think this kid's a contender. I think we'll see him in a title run. He's a really young kid. Then that brings us to heavyweights, Pat Barry and Shane Del Rosario. Excellent performance from Pat Barry. Del Rosario, had him down, was dominating him throughout the first round, but couldn't get the submission and was not doing the ground and pound he needed to do. I swear, UFC guys, when you get a guy down, you've got to put a hurt on him. You can't just go for a submission, because when the tide turns, they're going to stop the round. You're going to be back on your feet, and Pat Barry beat up Shane Del Rosario in the second round. It was ugly, and I feel bad for Del Rosario. He's 0-2 in the UFC. He could be cut. This was a kid who was undefeated, rolling along to quite a record in Strikeforce before he had a car wreck. Just hasn't been the same since the car wreck. I hope he's recovered. I hope he's physically. He looked good. He looked good in the fight. I mean, anybody can get knocked out by Pat Barry, one of the most dangerous punchers and kickers in the heavyweight division. Nonetheless, disappointing for Shane Del Rosario, and I wish him the best. Hope he turns things around. For Pat Barry, another exciting win. What can you say? Well done, Pat. And then Colton Smith took the Ultimate Fighter prize home, dominating Mike Ricci on all the cards. He even got a 10-8 round on one of the judges' cards. Not expecting a ton from Colton Smith. He'll probably move down to lightweight, I expect. Straight-up wrestler at this point, doesn't have much else to offer. I don't know how far that can get you in the UFC's welterweight and lightweight division. As for Ricci, if you can't handle Colton Smith, you're not going to be able to handle the UFC. I don't expect to see him lasting very long. That brings us to the finale, Roy Nelson versus Matt Mitrione. This was a fun fight. Meathead came out. Mitrione came out looking good, landing these big body kicks and head kicks on Nelson and punching well, but he neglected his defense, and Nelson capitalized a little bit over 258 the first round. He finished him with a brutal series of right hands, just vicious. And Mitrione just not quite at the Roy Nelson level. Nelson, somebody who's never quite risen to the contendership level. He's got losses to Frank Mir and Junior Dos Santos in fights where he looked pretty much completely outclassed, but has definitely established himself as a tough gatekeeper in the UFC's heavyweight division. Anyway, that's my Bathrobe review. I enjoyed the fights. It was I probably would have been more entertaining if it had been boiled down to one card and over one night instead of 2 cards and 2 nights. But hey, international expansion, I'm all for it. I think the Australian Ultimate Fighter was a success. I hope that they continue to grow the Australian market. Could be an important market for the future of the UFC. Good foothold in the Eastern Hemisphere to have. Good to see Roy Nelson getting a win. It's too bad Shane Carwin wasn't able to make the fight. Hope Shane recovers from his injuries and that we get to see him fight again. If not, probably time for Carwin to retire, and pretty good career, working his way up to UFC title shot. Wasn't able to win, although he came very, very close to beating Brock Lesnar, and I think that's something more notable accomplishment at the time when Carwin did it than it would become later when Lesnar declined from ill health. Anyway, if you like this sort of thing, subscribe to MMA Nation on YouTube and read my stuff at Bloody Elbow. And we'll be back next week with some more tete-a-tetes and discussions of the MMA world in general as we head into Christmas and UFC 155 with Cain Velasquez getting a chance to revenge himself against the man who took his heavyweight title, Junior Dos Santos. We'll be back later this week. Take care.